All right, gather close, travelers. Today, we're diving deep into an explainer of a truly dark, ancient legend. We're going to explore the saga of Frenzy, and specifically, the magnificent, terrifying transformation of the Jester. Think of this as a mature Gothic fable, a story all about surviving the sheer absurdity of life, violently shedding the heavy weights of the past, and ultimately claiming absolute personal sovereignty. So, let's get right into it.
Now, every great myth needs a villain, right? And here, our antagonist is entirely metaphysical. It's called the Spirit of Gravity. It represents the suffocating, heavy burden of the old order that just traps the human spirit. It literally treats you like a burden-bearing camel, loaded down with rigid rules, ancestral expectations, and a kind of psychological slavery that dictates exactly who you are supposed to be before you even take your first breath. That pervasive, invisible weight, that is the gravity our protagonist absolutely has to fight to survive.
So you've got these two colliding worlds in the saga. On one side, we have the Mausoleums of Stasis. This is where that burdened camel lives, completely trapped among rigid saga values and legalistic anchors. It's essentially the graveyard of our past, where all growth is just frozen solid. But the cure for this? It's liberating chaos. This is the fiery, untamed realm of the Laughing Dragon. You see, escaping that mausoleum isn't about some peaceful, polite reform. No, it demands a total transvaluation, a massive, chaotic upheaval of every single societal burden, to achieve true, unbridled freedom.
To actually survive this crushing gravity, our Jester has to wake up, and I mean really wake up, entering a state known as the Absolute Ich. It's this incredibly powerful self-contained identity that doesn't rely on the external world at all. No unearned historical status, no waiting around for the approval of the herd. When the Jester finally sheds those old chains, he doesn't just open his eyes. He undergoes a massive, violent metamorphosis. He uses ontological deconstruction to light an internal spark, transforming into a radiant dragon covered in brilliant verdant and gold scales.
Let's turn to our first parable in the saga, the Clockwork Breath.
This new awakening sparks a literal act of cosmic destruction against time itself. Picture this magnificent dragon ascending a massive ancient clock tower. He unleashes what's called the Zero Flame, and he just exhales, literally burning away the linear timeline of the old heroic age, scorching right through the flattened present and taking everything straight to the end. By destroying the mechanical clockwork of society's expectations, he returns the entire world to the chaotic, primordial void of Jinagaga. And through it all, his verdant wings beat powerfully, totally in sync with this ancient, liberating chaos.
And what does that destructive fire actually sound like? Well, the source texts don't just call it a roar, they call it active laughter. Seriously, think about the power of that concept. This active laughter completely shatters the mechanisms of the marketplace. It forcefully melts down the social masks that society wears to hide its insecurities. It basically proves that all those scripts and rigid legal authorities, they're incredibly fragile illusions. Placed next to the dragon's living truth, the heavy cage of our legacy is literally just sawdust blowing in the wind.
Moving right along to Parable 2, Shadows as Fuel.
So, plunging deeper into this absolute sensory vacuum of the void, our dragon has to confront his own ghosts through a process called shadow necromancy. Now, usually, in Gothic tales, ghosts are there to haunt and drain the hero, right? But our sovereign dragon totally flips the script. Instead of being weighed down by these genealogical shadows, like that burdened camel carrying the failed wills of his ancestors, he just consumes them. He transforms historical failure into the exact fuel he needs to sustain his internal zero flame. He isn't ignoring the past, he's literally burning it to power his own flight.
Okay, so after basically eating his own past, he overcomes what the texts call the eclipse of the ego. Staring directly into the void mirror, the dragon boldly affirms his own existence. He suddenly realizes, hey, I don't need any external validation from a society I just burned to the ground. He dances with the abyss as a resurrected archetype. He knows full well the universe is steeped in this verdant absurdity, where things don't inherently make sense. But it doesn't matter, because he burns brightly from within anyway, completely self-sustained.
All right, let's look at Parable 3, Defying the Web.
Coming down from those lofty heights, our dragon lands in these totally stagnant, silent graveyards and faces a sneaky new enemy, the tarantula preachers. Their weapon of choice? The venom of resentment. It's this bitter, moralistic guilt they desperately try to inject into the dragon, hoping to force him into their frantic, conforming dance of the tarantula. But the sovereign dragon?
He just looks at their attempts at control as a malignant fever. It's a sickness he was born to cure with his unanchored fire and his verdant gold truth.
So how does he escape this poisonous web? He uses what's called the pathos of distance. With a single powerful beat of his wings, he soars far, far above their great flattening. He utterly refuses to be anchored by their guilt or dragged down into their petty moralistic arguments. Actually, his very presence, hovering high above them, emits this intense magnetic distortion pulse that completely shatters their silent graveyard, leaving all their rigid, venomous laws totally and completely powerless.
But that brings us to this incredibly haunting question. Can a dragon outlast the sins of the father? Because listen, it's one thing to defeat a bunch of societal preachers. It is something else entirely to face the deep, corrupted roots of your own bloodline. This question brings us to the absolute climax of our legend, as our dragon prepares for a brutal, deeply personal plunge into his own history.
Which leads into Parable 4, the underworld of the blood.
This final trial, it's a literal ontological war against the very roots of ancestry itself. Armed with a chipped axe, the dragon violently cleaves straight through the floorboards of history. He plunges deep into the dark, poisoned waters of his ancestral line, the Volsung Curse, and annihilates the sins of the father right at their source. It is a terrifying, beautiful war, fought solely to remake his very being from the ashes of his past.
And finally, we arrive at the cosmic rebirth, the child of the new dawn. You see, because the ultimate goal of this entire saga, it was never just about fire and destruction. It was always about evolution. We started with the burdened camel, completely chained down by the spirit of gravity. We absolutely needed the fiery, laughing dragon to come in and shatter those old laws. But all of that destruction was merely to clear the space to reach the final beautiful state, the playful, innocent child embodying pure, sovereign joy. Now acting as the sovereign of the void, this new being totally embraces his duality. He has outlasted all the old cultural idols. He literally takes the heavy, oppressive spirit of gravity and actively transforms it into harmonious music. Adorned in brilliant gold and verdant scales, this child of the new dawn juggles the stars of his chaotic song with a completely unburdened spirit. He justifies his existence simply through a magnificent, joyful dance right on the grave of the old world. He's no longer reading society's script. He is the sole architect of his own drama.
So what does this all mean for us? Why does an explainer of this dark, gothic fable actually matter today? Well, it teaches us a pretty radical truth. Real power isn't about how much ancestral weight you can carry or how strictly you can conform to heavy, outdated traditions. True sovereignty is finding the radiant joy to play within a universe that might seem completely doomed or absurd. It's about cultivating your internal fire so deeply that you don't need a single person in the audience to validate your existence.
As we wrap up our explainer of this magnificent legend, I'm going to leave you to gaze into that void for a moment. Are you going to continue bearing the heavy weight of the camel, stuck in the mausoleums of stasis? Or will you awaken your absolute ish, exhale your own zero flame, and finally dance, unburdened among the stars? Ask yourself right now, what shape is your spirit going to take tomorrow?